Hi everybody. It's been a minute since I've done just a sit down, talk to the camera update on where I'm at with my photography, so I figured I'd do that right here, right now. Now, if you're expecting, all the fancy edits and all that kind of stuff, this is not that video. I want this video to just be a raw look at where I'm at with my photography. So if you want to have this open in another tab while you're doing something, then by all means, go ahead and do that. But to give it a little context, I've been doing this photography thing seriously since about 2017. That's 7 years. But actually, I've been interested in and pursuing photography since about 2014 at this point. So 10 years. And I realized that over the last couple of years, I got myself to a point where I've felt kind of stagnant, or like I've plateaued in my photography skills. And in kind of wondering how I got there, I was thinking about just my photography journey as a whole and how that has been for the last number of years. When I first started, I was shooting anything and everything, taking pictures of everything, whether it moved or not, like whether it was people, animals, landscapes. I found out pretty quickly I really liked landscapes. I tried a little bit of street photography, but I've gotten a little bit more into that now recently. But point is, I was just shooting anything and everything, and I loved it. I was experimenting all the time. And I think that's how a beginner should really learn, is by just getting a camera and just experimenting with things, because that is how you find out very quickly what you like, what you don't like, and how things work or don't. Now, I'm not saying, don't go look for online courses or YouTube videos or books or anything like that. In fact, we'll circle back to the books because that's kind of an important part of this video, but just really being open to experimenting and trying everything. Because when you're new, there's no pressure. There's no pressure to really perform, so to speak. There's no pressure to make every shot better than your last shot. You're not even necessarily putting any pressure on yourself because you don't know what really is coming next. You're just experimenting with stuff, which is fantastic. And so that's how I started, as I'm sure that's how most, if not all of us, started. And pretty quickly I found out what I liked and what I didn't like. The problem was the things that I liked I stuck with religiously, and eventually I got myself to a point where I was comfortable. Just comfortable, and that's it. Eventually I started doing photography as a service, and I started shooting things like weddings, or I sold a print or two of some of my landscape images. I started doing social media photography for businesses, which I'm still doing. The point is, I started providing that as a service, booking portrait shoots and all that kind of stuff. But then that was all I did. I did the photography that was required of me for work, in order to get paid. But I didn't really do anything outside of that. I didn't really pursue any personal photography goals because I got myself to a point where I couldn't see them anymore. I was shooting for a paycheck, and that was really all that I kind of felt like I cared about. And as a result, the creativity kind of went away. I got comfortable with the kinds of things that I was doing, and So as a result, I didn't really think that there was any kind of need to innovate or to try new things or to do things differently. I had just gotten kind of complacent, and as a result, I plateaued. And here's the problem with plateauing in something like photography is if you plateau and you don't intentionally do anything to break out of that flat spot and start growing again, then you will inevitably begin to decline. It's like our folks used to tell us, you don't use it, you lose it. And it took me a while to realize that I had actually plateaued and was kind of burned out. Burned out on what I had been doing. Now, this is not saying that, oh, I'm burned out on this, so I'm going to stop like doing it for work. That's not what that means. You know, as soon as the phone rings or I get an email, it's like, hey, could you do this? Yeah, because you know, I really like being able to provide that service for people. But for my own personal work, well, I didn't really have any, to be honest. I hadn't gone out and really shot things for myself and experimented in so long that I forgot kind of what it was like. And so I realized that maybe a month or two ago, something like that. And I was like, wait a minute, that can't be right. You know, if I am someone who is a visual creative person, then I wrongly assumed that that was something that I would just always have, but I don't really think that's the case. I've found myself getting somewhat rusty to the point where, you know, even setting up like the lighting setup that you're looking at right now, this is definitely out of the ordinary and it's new and it's different because I was like, you know what, let's try something. But this took me an embarrassingly long time to come up with and make it work because I had gotten rusty. I had let myself in my own personal work, my own, like pushing my own personal boundaries of what I was capable of, I had let that kind of slip or fall by the wayside. I didn't have a personal project, or like I didn't have any personal projects. I didn't really have any goals personally. I had goals for things that I wanted to do as a business, but personally, I didn't really have anything, and so I wasn't experimenting. I wasn't trying new things. I was stuck just in this loop. I was flat. I was plateaued, and I realized maybe a couple months ago, I realized what was going on, and I realized that it had been going on for far too long. And so I was like, well, that's not good. I have to do something about that. Now, here's the issue. Doing something about that was very uncomfortable. Is very uncomfortable because I am still, it feels like in the, I am in the beginning stages of breaking out of that flat plateau area, and it's definitely not comfortable. But here's the thing. The discomfort of staying in that plateaued space, once I realized what was actually going on, the discomfort of just sitting in that was too much. I was like, no. Yeah, breaking out of it and making myself come up with things, try new things, experiment with stuff, even if the results aren't perfect. That is uncomfortable, but nowhere near as uncomfortable as just staying in this flat, boring, plateaued, I only shoot the same kinds of things and I don't try anything new. That's far more uncomfortable. And so I thought, okay, I need to break out of this somehow. And like most of us, I'm sure, I was like, ooh, there's lots of content on social media. There's lots of tips, lots of tricks, lots of techniques. There's people have their portfolios of work and there's all this kind of stuff. I can go look at that. But there's a problem. The problem with that is the fact that social media is a rabbit hole that is all too easy to fall down, like way too far, and you end up on things that are completely different than what you originally even looking for, and it's a massive time waster if you're looking for inspiration. Not only that, but if you do find what it is you're looking for, it's far too easy to look at someone else's work and go, Look at the engagement they're getting. Why don't I get that kind of engagement? Well, my work is terrible. Like, why does my work not look like that? Like, I must suck as a creative, instead of being able to objectively look at it and go, that's awesome. How do I do that? How do I recreate that? What techniques were used? Things like that. So social media can end up being more of a trap, more of a hindrance than a help. And I know that with that statement, I am speaking for myself personally, but I feel like it would be reasonable to assume that I am also speaking for at least some other photographers out there. So with social media kind of crossed off the list as a viable option, I thought, well, what about YouTube? But the problem with YouTube is the exact same thing as with social media. The one benefit, though, is you can find things on YouTube, and I know YouTube is technically probably social media as well, but you can find tutorials on YouTube. You can find things, you can find an education on YouTube. There is educational content, there is value when it comes to learning new things there. The problem is, it's also very easy to fall down rabbit holes and get distracted. And if you're like me, and you have a hard time staying focused on things, yeah, it's, excuse me, it's kind of a dangerous thing. And so I thought, well, that doesn't work. And social media, hello loud motorcycle, social media kind of feels like a motivational death trap. So what can I do? And that's when I realized I had been really missing out on one of the largest, well, I don't know about largest, but one of the best and arguably most underrated sources of study and study, information, and inspiration there is out there, and that is books. So I have here 3 photography books that I've been going through. Yeah, I know, it's probably not a good idea to go through multiple books all at the same time, especially if you're me and you have a hard time sticking with things, but let me live. This first one, this is the Digital Photography, I don't know if you can see that because this lighting setup, but Digital Photography Masterclass, Advanced Techniques for Creating Perfect Pictures by Tom Ang. This book, I am maybe like a 10th of the way through this book, but it's incredible. The images in here are fantastic, and the level of detail in the breakdowns of the thought processes, the techniques, everything is laid out here in a way that makes it very, very easy to understand. But that said, this is definitely not a beginner level book by any stretch of the imagination. From like page 1, there's techniques that are definitely more advanced than just your basic exposure triangle. This book is already assuming you know the basics, and like you know the basics. But if you feel stuck, this is definitely a book that I would recommend looking into, that really breaks down things on a very like granular level and allows you to really understand how techniques that professionals use actually work. I've been doing this professionally for well, let's see, when I start my business. Yeah, for 7 years I've been doing this, you know, as a business, and there are loads of things in here that I'm learning that is either stuff that I kind of knew already a little bit, but had kind of just shoved away in the back of my head and wasn't using, and then it's like, oh wait, that's how that works? Things are explained in here very, very well, so I can definitely recommend this book. If I can find it on something like Amazon, I'll put a link down below in the description, but with a couple of these, I'm not sure if I'll be able to find them, but if I can, I'll link them. This one, definitely recommend. The next one that I have here is called Designing a Photograph. Again, you probably can't see that properly, but Designing a Photograph, Visual Techniques for Making Your Photographs Work by Bill Smith. Now this one was written in, I believe, let's see, it's in here somewhere, 1985. So this is a bit of an older book. But this one is great because it breaks down this, once again, assumes that you know the basics of photography, how the exposure triangle works, how depth of field works, how like motion blur and all these other things, all the basic stuff works. But this is breaking down techniques that you can use that make an image work from a viewing pleasure, a psychological, like, make this connect with your viewer standpoint, which is great, using things like composition, using contrast, using like contrast in tonality, yes, but also color and all kinds of stuff, which has been really, really good. I'm not very far into this book either, so by no means do I claim to have figured out how to master photography. I am not there yet, by any stretch of the imagination. I know quite a lot, but I am not a master. This book is awesome. This will open up new ideas for images, or ways that you can make images. And the photography in here is just, it's awesome. This is just some absolutely stellar work, and I can definitely recommend taking a look at this book. The third one that I have here, this is a bit of a newer book. Let's see. I don't remember off the top of my head when this one was released. 2019. Okay, so this one is a little bit newer, obviously, but this is Stories Behind the Images by Corey Rich, Lessons from a Life in Adventure Photography. Now this is less a how-to and more of a why and the stories behind photos, but the photography work in here is absolutely stellar. And it's really, really neat being able to read the stories behind the images, as per the name of the book, because it gives you an insight into not only what was going on in the situation, but what was going through the photographer's head when he took the photo. And that is something that I think is a very underrated thing to like read and study, because not only can you study the images in this book from like a compositional standpoint, and especially if you combo this book with the Designing a Photograph book, these two are one heck of a wombo combo. But being able to get kind of a window into the photographer's mind when he was taking these photos can really make you start to pay attention to what you're thinking when you're shooting a photo. Because I feel like a lot of times, I know at least for me, when I am shooting, like, you know, for a client or something like that, I will kind of get into this tunnel vision mode of just focused on the shoot and what's going on, and kind of block out everything else. But I think being able to see into another photographer's mind while they're shooting makes you really pay attention to what's going on in your own head while you're shooting, which can open up new ideas. It can open up new techniques, new ways of seeing things. And like I said, comboing the Stories Behind the Images and Designing a Photograph, you put these two books together and it's kind of like learning to develop a new brain for photography. It really allows you to learn what it means to see an image before you've even brought the camera up to your face. It's really a fascinating experience. Now, I am not very far into any of these books, to be perfectly honest. You know, so I'm not, you know, claiming to have figured any of this out, but this has definitely helped me to get my motivation for photography back up, and has me experimenting with things, because when it comes to my own personal work, it's kind of embarrassing a little bit. Like, my client work is good, and I know that probably sounds like, oh, he's bragging, but no, like, I have never had a client complain about the images that I've delivered. But when it comes to my own personal photography work, I really don't do much, which is a problem, because if I want to learn, to grow, to get better, to improve my skills, to increase my mastery level of, this photographic pursuit that I've been doing for the last almost decade or so, then having goals, having projects, and having things that I am pushing towards, boundaries that I'm pushing outside of what I do for work is really important. And so allowing myself to be exposed to bodies of work by other people that are much better than I am, and being able to see what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what they're thinking while they're doing it has definitely given me a lot of ideas for things that I can pursue in my own personal work, which will in turn make my professional work much better. And you put all this together, the plateaued feeling that I've had for the last few months, but has honestly been going on for the last couple of years, it kind of feels like it's starting to break a little bit. I'm starting to climb out of the hole, so to speak. And so if any of you out there are at all like me and you've felt kind of just stuck in what you were doing and bored with a lot of the photography work that you're doing, a lot of things that you're seeing, and any of the goals that you may have or not have but need to have, then I can highly recommend going and finding a photo book that either explains tips, tricks, techniques, or is even just, a body of work, a portfolio of work. Go find an actual physical photo book or a book about photography and crack that open. And I think you might just learn something. And at the very least, you'll enjoy it, because there's some really, really cool work out there. The added bonus of looking at it in an actual book is you're holding a print. You're holding an image in print in your hands, you're looking at it. It feels a lot more real. But that's another video. I don't want to fall down that rabbit hole right now. This video is probably long enough already. So yeah, I'll leave links to these books in the description if I can find them. And again, I can highly recommend all three of these. Would recommend cracking open a photo book. Go out. If you feel stuck with your photography, read. Take a break from shooting for a minute, because you're just going to be shooting the same things that have you bored anyway, and go read. It'll help, I promise. All right. That's it from me, folks. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you want to see more things like this, do all the YouTube stuff, subscribe, you know the drill. We've all been on this website for way too long anyway. So hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.